What's going on YouTube? Welcome to episode 8 of the U.S.S. Enterprise D tutorial. I'm Zero Elite, and I just want to thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode. If you haven't, please help me out. Hit that like and subscribe button, helping me in supporting the channel. I can't thank you enough for that. Everybody that takes the time to watch these videos, please hit that like button because it definitely helps my analytics on my videos. So thank you very much for that. Today we were picking up from episode 7, working on the backbone of our Enterprise D. A little bit of a shorter video today, 18 minutes, but we are going to finish up not only the backbone, but we're going to start to line up a little bit of the front and get some more pre-work done. So we're going to be spending some time on the neck. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this. I really wanted to make a point to build all of this out in real time. It's not that this is super overcomplicated, but I think it's at least complicated enough that we should be building this out in real time. Just in case anyone happens to make any mistakes. But kind of what we're doing right now is a little bit cut and dry right now. We're just transitioning down our rows that we started from the lip of our saucer, and also trying to figure out these corners right here where the cuts are going into, where the transition line is picking up right here. I'm not too set about how that looks, but there may not be able to be that much that I can do about it. Because one of the other things too is that we're going to have to get the backbone built and then get the front filled in just a little bit, and then start building the sides, the curve to the sides, to really see this, what changes we're going to need to make to this in order to make it look right. Yeah, it's just something about the way I have that going on right there. I mean, I don't know. It's not not necessarily giving me what I want. I think we're ultimately going to go back to what I just had here a second ago to make it match the left side. I'm just making the left side match what I have on the right side. So you can see I've stopped the transition at the last 3 rows, and now they're just going straight down on each side. If you want to keep up with me on here, you're doing the same things with me. Or you can also skip forward and watch what I do to see what changes you want to make. This is kind of like where I was saying that we're going to be doing a little bit more of a realistic build this time and trying to figure stuff out while I'm doing it, because unfortunately I have to show this stuff just to get everybody to the point that we're ultimately going to end up on to have the fully formed finished Enterprise D. And it just kind of works out this way sometimes. You just got to go through a trial and run period sometimes before you fall on what you want to fall on. And some of you are probably tired of hearing it, but that's just the best thing to do sometimes when you're not sure. Throw something down, see how it looks, and just start making changes to it that you feel that'll start making it look more like what you're going for. In this case, really trying to sell that backbone of the neck to get that angle right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least has to me it can't look weird. So I'm going back and forth between what I'm building, and I'm looking at my pictures and 3D reference of the Enterprise D. Alright, so now we're going to go to this side, in this middle row. We're going to take off that row right there, and then we're transitioning in again on the next row, which that could possibly work. That doesn't look terrible. This bottom row right here, we got to fix that. But definitely it's going to be kind of a pain to get this going all the way down, because we have our cuts going here, 2 on the right side and 2 on the left. I want to keep those there because it keeps the backbone being completely flat. And that's something that does stay true to the Enterprise D. That is of course, that the backbone of the neck is not completely flat. It does kind of curve and go with the saucer a little bit. So I'm really trying to make sure that I maintain that on this, because it's really going to help us to sell the overall look of the ship. And it's something that I talk about, like one of these pieces by themselves isn't going to sell it. When you take the time to build all these out, it's just like a layering process. Eventually, you've taken the time to build out all these pieces individually, it's all going to come together. And that's really what I'm trying to accomplish here. So I'm just taking the time to build this neck out, try to make it right, and just of course following my pattern that I pre-established. We're doing 2 rows of level. So that looks pretty good on the left. We're going to repeat the same process now on the right side. We're going to have to do some more cuts in to make sure we keep our transition, the angle going inward on the left and right. This is the other thing too. At the end of the day, we're working with blocks, so no matter what, we're not going to have a perfect shape. But kind of the idea is, you know, make it look as good as you possibly can. That's kind of what I'm going for. All right, so now we're going to go to our next row. Yeah, man, we've got a lot of work here to do on this neck. Because after we're done with the backbone, then we've got to fill in the sides and then the front, and that's going to be a little bit of a process to get that perfect. Because that is something with the Enterprise D. I think that the neck and the deflector dish, and the lower hull entirely, they're very iconic parts of the ship, and they look a certain way. And I think that pretty much almost everybody at one point or another has seen at least a picture of the Enterprise D. So I mean, most people know what it looks like, and when you're dealing with something like that, it's kind of hard to take a lot of liberties with it. You really got to, you know, stay true to it and build it for what it is. But that's okay. We're just going to take our time here and just do 1 row at a time. Yeah, just making sure I'm keeping my original pattern, doing 2 rows of level. So far looking good. Let's add another row. And of course you can see where I'm transitioning, I'm minding our cuts. So now we've gone down to a point that our first cut right here on the sides, that's kind of faded out with this slant that's going inwards. So now we really have to deal with this cut right here. And that's not going to be a problem for right now, at least until we get to a couple more rows down. But eventually we're not going to have to worry about that. But even for what it is right now, that doesn't look terrible. It looks pretty good. It's passable, but it needs a little bit of work, I think. I'm not going to lie, I remember when I was actually done building out this backbone, wasn't entirely sure how it was going to come out. I remember I was just sitting there staring at it, because it came out a lot better than I thought it was going to. I think when we get down to the bottom, it's going to look pretty decent, and we'll have enough done of it, at least to where we can start worrying about doing the front of the neck and then the sides. Because it's kind of like a 3-part build on the neck itself. We've got the backbone, we've got the front, and then we have the 2 sides. The sides are going to be one of the hardest parts to do on the ship, because the way the Enterprise D on the neck, it slopes in. It's almost kind of like, it reminds me of like a King Cobra's sides of its neck, the way it flaps out. It looks doesn't look exactly like it, but it really reminds me of it. And that was kind of something I was just like thinking in the back of my head while I was building this, trying to figure out how I can come up with a pattern that will kind of reflect that. Because I did my homework on this when I was getting ready to build this ship. I went on YouTube and just looked on Google. Other people have done similar builds, just to get an idea of what they've done. And that was one thing that I really had a hard time with. Couldn't find anybody that had any close pictures of their neck to a point that would be any type of use to me. And the ones that were, they were pixelated to the point that I didn't really see a pattern that I could identify that I would at least want to bring over to my ship, because that's something that I try to stay true to when I'm building these things. I try to stick to a pattern because I feel like when you do that, it looks a lot better than it just being a whole bunch of random blocks that kind of come together and make a shape. It looks like it was just kind of mushed together. Or I've seen other people, they use that shaven look where it looks like a shaven piece of wood where they've shaved the angles down to get their shape. It almost even looks like a computer rendered image. And at the end of the day, these ships, you know, they're man-made, they're mathematically sound. So I mean, it should have like almost, it should have patterns to it. It's kind of what I'm getting at, and I think it definitely looks better, hands down, when we stick to the patterns on here. But it's sometimes a pain in the butt to get to that point to come up with these patterns, because like I was saying in yesterday's episode, that a lot of the prep work, if not all of it, that I had done to get ready to do this build, it really just got me familiar with building the Enterprise D, but as far as the patterns themselves, they were useless. I couldn't use any of them because of the scale of this thing and what I was doing. I ended up having to come up with completely new patterns for what I'm doing right here, especially like with this neck, the backbone, for example. I've never built a neck with a pattern like this before. This is the first time I've ever done something like this. The way it's transitioned down and literally attached to the neck, or excuse me, attached to the back piece of the top lip of the saucer, because it's the same shape. We've just stretched it down. We've transitioned layer to layer. And that's great because as you zoom out and look at it, it all looks like it's one piece. Doesn't look like an add-on or something that's kind of standing out of place. And that's kind of the whole goal here, you know, to try to make this stuff come together to a point where it doesn't look like it was just different sections that we built singly, but none of them match up, you know? All right, so that's not a huge deal right now. We're hitting that last cut right here, which will be nice because now we won't have to deal with that anymore as we transition inward. And it'll also be a little bit easier as we're going row to row because we're starting to run out of real estate and getting closer to the bottom. It's going to be a little while, but before you know it, we'll be done building the outside of the ship, but we've got a lot of work to get there. A ton of work still left to do on the neck, and then we're going to have a lot of work to do on the lower hull, specifically the deflector dish. Because I remember when I was doing this build, those were the two areas I had the hardest time with getting them to come out right. And I wish I had a simpler method of doing it, but this is why I'm trying to show you guys everything that I'm doing, because if I'm just showing you a straight tutorial that's skipping over not only my mistakes, but the trial and error process that I've taken to get here, you're not necessarily learning anything. And I kind of feel like this is the way to go about it and show everything that I've done in the hopes of other people that are trying to do this, they've come across the same problem, or maybe they're doing a completely different build, but then you start to think differently in trying to problem solve with your patterns and coming up with something that matches, you know, what you're trying to build. See, that doesn't look terrible. That looks pretty good so far. It'll look a little bit nicer when we have the half slabs in there, kind of smoothing out the cuts of each row. Now we're really going to start cooking because you don't have a heck of a lot of room to go into on each side here. And that's looking pretty good. So at the end of the day, the thing to think of is, does it look like the Enterprise D? Does this area remind you of the Enterprise D? And while mine's not perfect, I think on the Enterprise D it kind of curves a little bit more. But this was pretty hard to pull off even as it is. I just kind of came up with the idea. It was like, well, let's just go in a V shape. That's going to be close enough. I think it would have, I don't know if necessarily would have been impossible to make it a little bit truer to the Enterprise D, but at the end of the day, this is just kind of what I've fallen on. That if I was going to do it, this is what I'd settle on. Because this thing was hard enough to build as it is, this neck, and I've built a couple of Constitution classes, but I don't know if I'll ever build another Galaxy class. This was a hard ship to build, but I definitely appreciate it, and I've had a lot of fun doing it, and there's going to be other ships from the next generation I'm definitely going to be building, which brings up, of course, always down to talk about what the next build is going to be. Even though I'm not necessarily thinking about that, at the end of the day, you know, if there's something that you want to see me build on the channel, drop a comment below. And if I get some people that are interested in it, enough people that I can warrant making some tutorials off of it, that people would be interested in watching it, that I'll definitely do it. But yeah, and see the last 2 rows, we're just going to make those, or I should say the last 3 rows are going to be the same width on each side. See, that looks pretty good. That's not perfect, but it's not bad. It's not bad at all. That looks pretty good. I was trying to get this done in really one episode yesterday, and then I realized that I was just gonna completely blow up the time on my videos, and I really don't want to go over 20 minutes unless I can help it. And yesterday's video, I think we ended up at like 34 minutes, but if I cut it any shorter than what it was, I didn't feel like we were getting enough done, so that's kind of why I just decided to make it a little bit longer than I normally do. Right now, we're going to go over to the front of the neck, and we're just going to add pretty much like a wall. We're going to be bringing up all these rows up to the top, and we're going to pretty much, I think, do that going all the way down as it curves in. Because we're going to need stuff to build off of, and at least a base to go off of here as well. Or at least that's just kind of my thoughts on it right now. Because you got to remember, at this point, I wasn't 100% sure on how I was going to do the sides. And after building this once, if I ever do build another Galaxy class, I may not necessarily do it in this same way again. But again, this is kind of what I did to get to where we're going to end up being. So this is just a step. I'd still regardless do it anyway, because we are going to use this wall here that we're building right now, even though if we're going to end up ultimately hollowing it out. And kind of the way that I end up going with the sides here is I kind of just start adding layers to it to get it to where I want it to be. And there's a couple of things that I tried and then decided I didn't like and then go back. But it's going to happen. And there's just kind of no way to avoid it. But we'll make the best of it. And we've got a little bit done here finally on the Enterprise D. I think it can finally start to say that it's starting to look a little bit like the Enterprise D for the first time in this build. All things considered, the scale of this ship, I think that the fact that we're only at episode 8 is pretty good, because this is a ton of work right here just on the amount of stuff that we've done. This at this point in time, I had already put in considerable amount of time just rendering this stuff in. The saucer really took up quite a bit of time to get that right. And you see from the front, that angle there on the sides, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. That's right there what the Enterprise D should be. That looks pretty good. Yeah, we are in really good shape right now, where now we can go in and we can add in all of our detail and start building in the sides, because we need this neck. We really need this neck, at least what I have so far, before we can really even start thinking about building out the lower hull, because it's going to help us to proportion out how big the lower hull needs to be. But we'll get there, and yeah, I think that's going to wrap us up today. We've gotten a little bit done, but there's still a ton of more work to do on this build, and I hope you all stay with me over the course of building this Enterprise D. And yeah, that's going to wrap us up today. I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in today's episode. If you did enjoy this content, please help me out. Hit that like and subscribe button, helping me in supporting the channel. I can't thank you enough for that. And new subscribers, don't forget to hit notification on so you always get notified when those new videos drop. And speaking of my new videos, you can usually catch my Starship Evo builds dropping on Mondays, my Minecraft videos dropping Tuesdays through Thursdays. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for me. I just want to thank you all again for tuning in today's episode. I hope everybody has a happy and safe week, and I'll catch you on the next episode.